Cloudscratchers is a webcomic series first created all the way back in 2012 and still ongoing to this day. Based on Tailspin, the series is both a wholesome and deranged story about war. Though despite having gone on for 12 whole years, the series has a very small community behind it. As a matter of fact, if you look up Cloudscratchers right now here on YouTube, you get an animation from the publisher, a since cancelled fan game, an interview, and that's it. This comic has no public consciousness. As a matter of fact, I found this series by complete fluke, stroke of God, when I was flipping through the TV Tropes random media button and stumbled across it. And I only checked it out when I saw this face immediately before reading Child Soldier. And so I decided to give it a go. As I'm sure you can tell by this video's runtime, it did not disappoint. I even own a physical copy, for God's sake. And I have an OC. His name is Doss, and he is a crocodile. Anyways, to cut to the chase, the series is about a rebel group called the Cloudscratchers who are fighting against the Margoth Empire. An empire of snake people who follow Margoth and plan on conquering the other nations and committing genocide on all non-serpent species. We follow a colorful cast of people, a part of the Cloudscratcher crew. Our main character is Felix, an eccentric cat boy child genius of machinery. We also have his adopted father known as the Captain, who is the Captain. There's Alice, his right-hand man, Burt, one of the pilots who has a weakness for women similar to something like Brock from the Pokemon anime, and Jacques, the hot-headed pig seeking to avenge the fallen swine empire. There are many more, but to breeze through the last few important ones, we have Sally Jean, the bovine chef who's a fighting powerhouse, Ixia, who we'll meet in a bit, and Soggat, my beloved. And that's not even touching on our antagonists, like Borzax, the psychotic and violent commander of the empire, and, gripping stuff, I know. But we'll be meeting each of these funky dudes soon. For now, though, let's start from the very beginning. We started off with two of the ship's crew, Burt and Jacques, after they've blown up some enemy ships. These snakes here are members of the Margoth Empire. It's established how weak the Empire's been against the rebel group in this area, as the soldiers can barely keep up with the two rebels, even destroying their own ships on accident. Eventually they make their way back to the Cloudscratcher, where we meet our main man Felix, as well as the Captain himself. With the soldiers out of commission, the Captain decides it would be best to stock up on supplies.
We'll be returning to Skyport De La Rosa soon. Jacques, Felix, you'll be coming with me to pick up the supplies I ordered.
Yes, sir, Captain, sir.
Fine by me.
Yes! Hopefully I can convince the captain to take me to the scrapyard again. This is the time of the week they get in all the new parts, you know?
I know you're a total gearhead and all, but I can't for the life of me understand how you can get so excited browsing through other people's junk every week.
Other people's what?
Hey now, Jacques, be careful. Never say the J word around Felix, remember?
Right, I forgot.
We continue along to our first scene with Soggat, who's basically been under house arrest because, seeing as he's a snake, the city is still fighting against the Margoth tend to get tense when it comes to their kind. Arriving at Skyport De La Rosa, they quickly are told that there's been an odd solo Imperial fighter just flying around, and nobody knows why. It's suspected to be sent by Commander Borzax, the Shining Sword of the Empire, who's recently been shipped out here to West Bravo. This makes Jacques tense and upset, as he was a member of the Swine Nation, which was conquered by the Empire as well. Returning to the ship, Captain decides to make a risk and let the lone fighter jet board the Cloudscratcher upon it sending an SOS. As soon as they open the hangar, it rushes in with the Cloudscratcher crew readying their guns. However, the plane crashes inside. Before Burt can open fire, however, the soldier comes out announcing that they need to be brought to the feline capital ASAP. The crew takes the mystery soldier inside to interrogate them, and it's quickly revealed that they're a child soldier who was drafted when they were 10. Felix is very upset that they crashed their plane into the hangar, but the mystery soldier named Ixia insists that it was a matter of life and death. And so we get a flashback showing when Borzax first entered West Bravo, immediately slapping the soldier into shape like you'd expect from an aggressive military sergeant. Borzax also shows their own personal command of soldiers, known as the Silver Vipers. Borzax plans to do a little more of what was commanded of them, however, as rather than just listing the rebels' power in the region, Borzax announces how they intend to conquer the feline nation with use of a secret weapon: Hellfire Venom. A sadistic chemical concoction, Hellfire Venom perpetually spreads and burns, sticking to people's skin in a way that's near impossible to get off. With no way to get to stop burning, even if you survive the initial bomb, Borzax quite gleefully describes how it suffocates its victims due to the substance destroying the air's quality, effectively ensuring no survivors. Something I noticed while reading, and I don't know if this is intentional or not, but it seems to have a very, very uncanny similarity to napalm, an actual substance used both in World War II and the Vietnam War, especially with its description reaction of sticking to people while burning and being near impossible to get off of you. And the suffocating has also deoxygenated the air in the surrounding area, making it hard to breathe and resulting in many deaths regardless of if you got in direct contact with it or not. Borzax continues that the feline nation's capital Felisburg will be having a festival soon, and that would be the best time to drop the bomb, hiding in cloud camo above the event. With the whole picture, the Cloudscratcher crew are horrified and gladly let Ixia go, announcing that they'll be heading straight to Felisburg to warn them. Jacques is rather opposed to this, but the captain insists that they're going to the feline nation. With Ixia now part of the crew, Felix decides they'll show them around the ship, but before they have a proper introduction, we get a bit of world building about how snake names are made by piecing parts of their parents' names together. And Felix's parents are dead!
Oh, I'm so sorry. Don't worry about it. I never knew him. Died during Imperial attack when I was a baby. The captain's raised me since as long as I can remember, so he's like my one parent. I don't know any of his family, so I don't know if I could make a servant name with just one family member. I'm sorry. Huh? What are you apologizing for? The Empire took your parents away before you even got to know them. I'm so sorry for everything we've put you through. We? I don't see your name on the Empire. But my people are responsible. You didn't do nothing. Don't go around thinking everything the Empire does is your fault just because you're a servant. Because it isn't. And if you keep going through life thinking every bad thing other people do is your responsibility, well, you just can't do that. It's too stressful. It gives you ulcers, makes your hair go gray. You're not some Imperial toy tied to everything they do. You're Ixia, and I'm Felix, and this is the Cloudscratcher. That's what's important. You're right. I know I shouldn't, but... Listen, what's the name of the serpent's god? Margoth. Right, Margoth! He must really like you. You know why? Because of all the ships you could have crashed into, you ended up here on the Cloudscratcher. We're big names around here, and you know why? Because we beat the Empire all the time. Whenever it's us versus the Empire, we leave those guys looking stupid in our dust. So what if this Borzax guy's a big shot? You know what that means? I'll tell ya. All it means is that when the captain and his men go up against him, they'll actually have to break a sweat. And if he thinks he's actually going to be able to drop that stuff on Felisburg, he's as crazy as you say, because the guys on this ship are going to stop him. And then you won't need to be worried. And you can start smiling a little more, because you look better when you smile. Frowns never look good on anyone, you know? Thanks.
And so they go off to explore the ship, though why are Felix's feet so big in this panel? Like, when we see them, his feet are bigger than most, but in other panels they just look less weird. Like, here they're like 3 times the size of his hands, at least 5 times the size of Ixia's. And I don't know, I just thought this looked funny and wanted to point it out. I swear I'm not always looking at their feet. I just wanted to point it out because it looks weird. Into the kitchen, we get to meet Sally Jean, the crew's chef. While they praise Ixia for what she did... Wait, she's a cow. And she's giving them milk. Sally suggests that Felix should introduce her to Soggat, seeing as he's the only other serpent on the ship. Before we can, though, we get a little sneak peek of how Borzax and the Empire are doing. As they take down an innocent delivery ship, Borzax is as sadistic as ever and is showing off to his newly joined recruits just how good his silver vipers are. Eventually, once they've had enough fun, they take out the cockpit and blow the delivery ship to smithereens. Back on the Cloudscratcher, before they get to Soggat, Ixia briefly meets Burt again, as well as Alice, both of whom are pilots on the ship. They have come to relay a message from the captain suggesting that Ixia switches out of their soldier uniform so people aren't as tense when they get to Felisburg. Seeing as Felix and Ixia are the same size, they decide to have Felix part with some of his clothes so Ixia can wear something less threatening. We switch again back to Borzax POV, where he's meeting with Noggos, an old major in the military, to get the Hellfire Venom. However, Noggos announces that this will be the last time he's doing any favors for Borzax. Agathoth, the man responsible for making the military's weapons, including the Hellfire Venom, is a complete psycho. Allegedly. On top of that, he also somehow rose to colonel by being chummy with the Empire. Borzax doesn't seem to mind, though, if anything being more interested now. Though we again get, although far more blatant confirmation, that Borzax isn't exactly authorized to go through with his plan. Apparently he's only supposed to test the Hellfire Venom, not actually go on the attack like he's planning. And back to the crew. Ixia successfully changed. Soggat has arrived too, which quickly sends Ixia into a panic. Seeing as Soggat is a priest, specifically a messenger of Margoth, apparently you aren't supposed to look a messenger in the eye. However, Soggat reassures her that this isn't his way, and that they aren't with the Empire anymore, ending with a bit of a wholesome note, where Soggat says his doors are always open and to simply call him Mr. Soggat. We then get to meet Delila, who's the crew's communications officer, and effectively acts as Felix's sister figure. Scene isn't too important, but soon after we move on to meet Scotty, who I completely forgot existed until going back through to write this. Basically, he's the crew's other mechanic, and Felix's apprentice, which I'm not gonna lie, that's a pretty interesting dynamic, with the kid genius being the boss and the old man being the apprentice, instead of the other way around. And so they get to fix it. Ixia mentions that they're welcome to destroy the fire jet, which gets Felix excited because he can dismantle it for parts and upgrade the system. We also get to learn a bit of backstory regarding Felix's ability with machines. One night when Felix was younger, he dismantled all of the planes overnight. The captain was infuriated with this, and so he ordered Felix to spend the rest of the day putting them back together in hopes of making him understand how much work it is to actually make these machines work. However, when he came back to the hangar, Felix had actually managed to put them back together in good shape, completely functional, and even somewhat better than before. After that, they let him help out with the machines on the ship ever since. A quick glimpse back at Borzax and crew, they form a cloud camo around their ship as well as some spotter cams to slowly float to the capital without anyone suspecting anything. And just like that, we're at Felisburg. The captain plans to get an audience with the feline nation's leader, but in case they don't listen, seeing as the feline military is known to be rather stubborn, they have two of their other crew members preparing a plan B. While the captain does that, some of the others will be taking Ixia around the city as well. The captain talks with their leader, General Captain Leon, which, just as predicted, is rather skeptical of Ixia and her story, especially because apparently this exact situation happened with the Swine Empire, where a fake whistleblower was sent in, and when the military set up their defenses with that information, they were easily taken down by General Borzax.
Look, O'Connell, I say this because I like you, and I don't want to see you get killed. You have got to stop thinking of these snakes like they're everyone else. Snakes are just wired differently than the rest of us. With other people, we're wired to be decent folk. It's the flukes among us that become criminals, killers, pirates, and all that crap. With snakes, it's the other way around. They pop out of their mamas as sociopaths, and the only thing keeping them from killing each other is that their god tells them they can kill the rest of us all they want, and be rewarded for it. They're naturally programmed to lie, cheat, steal, and kill people. Ever heard of a feline empire? How about a canine empire? Ever seen the bovine government order the slaughter of women and children? Let's say that priest, or whatever he calls himself, that you found really is a legitimately good person. That doesn't automatically mean that the snakes are decent folks all of a sudden. He is to the snakes what people like Captain Blackheart or Valentine are to the rest of us. He is a fluke going down the wrong path. The difference is, to them, the wrong path is believing in the value of non-serpent life.
And you honestly believe this garbage? You honestly believe every serpent is somehow born evil because of what the Empire has done? You're willing to disregard a possible catastrophe because you have it in your head that all serpents are liars?
After having to console countless families, after telling them their sons, daughters, moms, and dads are never coming home because some snake was told their god says they're better than everyone else, and it could take our land and our lives all they want. Tell me, O'Connell, when have these snakes ever given me any reason to think any way else? But if you think this little snakeling is being upfront with you, let me ask you, how is it Borzax got a hold of an untested weapon? The Empire doesn't allow frontline officers to have untested weaponry. How is the bomber supposed to sneak over the city when Cloud Camo is stationary? And what's Borzax gonna do about the backup we'll call from Berkshire? The man's nuts, but he's not stupid. Why don't you go get the revised version of this story from the snakeling? And when she can't come up with anything believable, feel free to bring her into us. We'll get the truth out of her and find out what Borzax is really planning.
Now, what's so good about this scene is that despite the fact this is obviously a racism plotline, they aren't mustache-twirlingly evil or anything like that. They have reasons to believe the way they do, even if they are incorrect about them. They have depth and reasoning enough to where if you were in Leon's shoes, you'd reasonably not trust Ixia enough to take that risk either. Or where you'd also be hardened enough to see the world that cynically, in the same black and white sort of way. Anyways, with the meeting done, Ixia and the others meet back up. However, with a newfound sense of skepticism, the captain is ready to ask him the valid questions that stuck with him. However, Ixia is easily able to answer them, specifically in regards to the cloud camo now using generators that constantly spew fake clouds, allowing the camo to stay even while they're moving. With this new knowledge, the captain apologizes and decides to try for plan B instead. And just in time too, as Burt and Jacques arrive with a rented ship so they can take down Borzax before he makes it to the festival. Heading out, they quickly spot the ship thanks to their spotter cameras. Oh yeah, and he also takes out his hat here, so I just want to show you his flowing golden locks.
Just a few more hours.
Man, these bombers were not meant for overnight missions. My back is killing me.
They didn't give you a cot?
They didn't have enough for everybody. Guess who was the unlucky one last night?
Man, that's rough.
What the heck was that?
Y'all keep making these fancy armored doors, but y'all never seem to upgrade your hinges. The hinges always give way before the door does. Makes a mighty fine projectile though, so I can't complain.
They quickly find themselves fighting through Silver Vipers, but to their surprise, Ixia is actually a surprisingly capable fighter, managing to take them all out single-handedly. The crew is surprised, in part because she is 12, but nonetheless they continue to do their mission, with Felix disarming the bombs, and Alice hijacking their communications, taking the time to taunt them and tell them exactly which group is ruining their plan. I mean, to their credit, they don't reveal Ixia told them, but why tell them which rebel group's taken hold of them? You're making it where they have to spend less time figuring out who you are and who's with you.
Sir, what do we do now?
Cloudscratcher. Cloudscratcher. I'll tear every strand of dirty flea-ridden fur off those worthless pieces of trash. You think you're cute, huh? You second-class garbage. You living septic refuse. I'm gonna tear you in half. I'll eat your whole family alive in front of you. You hear me? Initiate remote bypass of the bomber's autopilot.
But, sir, that bomber belongs to Major Noggos. It's not part of our network. By the time we took remote control, they'll—
Do what I say!
Escaping the vessel, the Cloudscratchers radio the city's border guard. However, just when they think they're in the clear, Borzax takes back control of the ship and tries to fire them down.
Hurry, to the city! If we draw the bomber close enough, Felisberg's gun towers will take it out!
Sir, won't this give us away? Couldn't we just hover the bomber over the festival remotely and—
Those pests probably already called the Feline Nation. The ambush is shot. I was sent to West Bravo not just to whip those maggots into shape, but to curb the rampant rebel problem in this area. Or have you forgotten? I'm just following my orders. I'm solving the problem. I'm gonna make this Cloudscratcher crew wish they were never born. And Felisberg's guns will make sure that all the evidence that I tried to do anything more than that is buried below the clouds. I'm solving the problem! Run! Run!
Luckily, they made it just in time to the gates, with the gun towers taking the ship down. But this isn't the end for Borzax. Not by a long shot. We start this next chapter off at the festival where Ixia and the Cloudscratchers are being congratulated as heroes for stopping the catastrophe. As they return to the ship, they're all but celebrating until Soggat arrives in a hurry. Upon learning that the media got photos of Ixia at the event, Soggat explains the military's 72-hour policy, where if a traitor to the Empire doesn't give themselves up within 72 hours of being charged, then they will hunt down each of their family members and execute them until they give themselves up. This, of course, puts Ixia into hysterics. With that, they know they have to make it to Barbon City in the Swine Empire and try to find Ixia's family before they do, and fast. As you can expect, Borzax isn't doing too hot. Beyond enraged, throwing people around and trying to find the traitor in their midst, he's interrupted by a call from Colonel Agathoth. We actually get to see Agathoth in action as they help pay for someone else's food after they say they're tight on money and can't afford it. Actually, he seems like a nice guy. He doesn't seem to care for the super formal stuff, and once he hears from the kid that their father's in the war, he tells them that he'll temporarily unenlist their father from the war so they can finally come home and reunite. Huh. Maybe Noggos was over-exaggerating about that whole psycho thing. Anyways, with Borzax on the line, Agathoth tells him that he knows what happened with the Hellfire Venom, but luckily for Borzax, the Emperor doesn't. He offers to withhold this blunder from the record in return that Borzax owes him a favor. Vague and unnerving, but with no other choice, he accepts. That's not the end for Agathoth though, as right after he hangs up with Borzax, he rings up a little someone else, which soon enough is revealed to be Morgoth himself. He's no god though, he's the Emperor. Oh, and remember how he was gonna let that father go home to his kid? Well, instead he offers an experiment. Transfer him from where he's working to the thick of battle without warning for a month. If he survives, he gets half a year to spend with his family, and if he dies, well, he's dead. To which the Emperor agrees. Damn, Agathoth, Noggos was right, jeez!
How is everyone finding out about this? Who's been going around singing about a secret operation like some third-rate street performer singing to everyone with a coin to throw away? This doesn't make sense. There's no one among us who— Among us?
So anyways, he figures out it was Ixia, as he just assumed she got lost up until now. But after what happened, there's no way he's waiting for those 3 days. Back to the ship though, Ixia's calmed down a little thanks to Soggat. Jacques isn't here, but he's apparently taking it pretty rough because they're entering the taken over Swine Nation. Ixia pretty quickly opens up about what it was like being drafted at such a young age. Apparently it's a new program made to make super soldiers once they've grown up. Their basic needs were heavily neglected, they were constantly put to work and barked orders, and never got any breaks except for when eating. Muscles were torn, bones broken, bodies shutting down. down, but they'd be put right back to it once they were patched up. It was hellish, but the thing Ixia remembers most was a man with yellow eyes. Now, where have we seen that before? The one thing that got her through was knowing that one day she'd use it all to get back at the Empire, that she'd join the good guys and maybe even take down that man with yellow eyes that tormented them so long ago. We get a quick glimpse at Major Noggos' life back at home. Hearing what happened with the Hellfire Venom, he's baffled. But he's more baffled that Agathoth is covering for him, as the media's painting it as Agathoth's idea, not Borzax's. It's a pretty short scene, but it'll be important for later. On the ship, it's late at night and Ixia can't get any sleep, so they visit Felix to find that he's still awake too, tinkering around the hangar. We get a short, not so subtle shipping moment between the two, with Delila noticing this and closing the door. Arriving in Barbon, the captain makes sure everyone is ready.
Soggat, what's the word on our contacts in the Sword of the Serpents?
I've already made all the necessary arrangements. They said we should see the anchorage they've set up for us plainly from the direction we're approaching from. I'll contact them again when we're in view of the city. When they get to my signal, they'll activate a set of guide lights out the anchorage. Just pull the ship into the center of the lights and they'll take care of the rest.
Alice, you'll be accompanying us. In case things get messy, we'll need you as backup.
Yes, sir. You can count on me.
And as for you, Felix, I believe I told you to get plenty of sleep before the mission.
Yes, sir, you did.
And I believe I gave you a very clear bedtime last night, did I not?
That'd be another yes, sir.
And did you do as I asked?
I got sleep last night, yes, sir.
Did you now?
Uh-huh, I definitely did sleep.
Mm-hmm. So all this just magically appeared overnight then, did it?
I may have had some trouble sleeping, and it's possible I may have done some work to help with the insomnia.
So, instead of the amount of rest I told you to get, how long did you actually sleep?
Up till the time you walked into my room to wake me up.
Yes.
37 seconds.
We'll discuss this after the mission is over. Alice, Ixia, get ready to disembark. The rest of you, I want you at your posts and ready to move if I need you.
Before they go, though, Delila tries to ask the captain to let Felix come with as support for Ixia, as the two have been getting along very well and Ixia's been using them for comfort. After some convincing, the captain begrudgingly agrees. Inside Barbon, they quickly meet with the rebels. We do get a short scene with some more world building, continuing to show, not tell, how swine are viewed inside the Swine Empire, with the scene of a snake being upset by even the idea that a pig made their food upon being served. I know I've said it before, but again, the comic does a really good job at showing rather than telling when it comes to its world building. Showing that the world continues on even without the Cloudscratchers being there, and properly showing the world doesn't revolve around them adds to the stakes, and properly shows that the problems within their world aren't just something used to inconvenience the Cloudscratchers, but a constant pulling force in their world that people are dealing with. Also, a reminder that these two people are actually characters we've seen before from Borzax's crew earlier on. But at the end of the scene, some of the rebel group are able to get their hand on a delivery van, and just like that, we're back with Borzax. Finally getting Ixia's file, they're surprised by how little family they have. Sure, surprised at who they're related to, but before we can hear the name, they're cut off by their soldier. Borzax, being the violent buffoon he is, lashes out at their soldier, to which it turns out they were just letting them know that Shogun is here. A military official that is above Borzax and part of the punishment squad. Given Borzax had to request the files, they of course found out about it, and came to remind him about that 72-hour policy, and to top it all off, he's not allowed to go on his little revenge quest because he's taken over that responsibility. They get to a bit of a shouting match, and just like that, we're back with our favorite rebels. They're all in the back of the van while they drive to where they need to be, trying their best to be inconspicuous. From the window, though, they can see just how heavily they push propaganda here. Particularly, there's a massive statue of the Emperor here, which reminds Ixia of a past memory.
Already with the waterworks? You ain't even halfway done! You make me sick! You gonna show this kind of weakness in front of your emperor? What if the furballs saw a weakness like this in you?
Number 42, was it? I'm curious. Tell me, why is it you're the only one who never cries?
You okay, Ixia?
Yep, I'm just fine. And just like that, we're back with Noggos. However, this is the scene that, in combination with another scene coming up, single-handedly made me like Noggos. So rather than over-explaining it, I'll just have it play out in its entirety.
Is this some kind of joke?
No, sir. You asked to see the documents. These are the documents.
Are they? Because I couldn't tell with this amount of redaction. This is an insult! This doesn't even look like an official document anymore! For Margoth's sake, not only is the date redacted, which makes no sense, because the date of the incident in question is public knowledge, but even the word date is redacted. Is the concept of time now classified information? Someone obviously just took a marker to everything on this report without even reading it. In all my years of experience, this has got to be the most unprofessional thing I have ever seen. Look at my uniform. See these colored stripes? That means I'm a Conquest Active Commanding Officer. See how they're green? That means I'm a Major. In case you're unaware, that means I have a level 5 security clearance. Now why don't you go back and bring me the correct copy of this report?
I'm well aware of your rank and security clearance, Major Noggos. If you want to see the full report, you will need level 8 security clearance. If you still think we're mistaken, you can take it up with the High Bookkeeper. Otherwise, your issue is with your superiors, and I can't help you.
Level 8? Agathoth is a colonel. He doesn't have the authority to lead an operation requiring level 8 classification.
Well, that's how Imperial Intelligence designated it. Take it up with them.
They're messing with me. No, he's messing with me. Redaction of that level is an obvious message. I don't know what strings you're pulling, Agathoth, but there's something you don't want me to know. And I'm going to find out what it is.
And so the van arrives where we need to go, Ixia's old house. Inside, the place seems to be taken care of, and their car is still here, but it's clear nobody's lived here. Ixia's panicking. Though after a short while and deducing they weren't captured, someone comes through the door. It's Ixia's neighbors, Mr. and Mrs. Barbanux. But soon we're back with Noggos' investigation.
Well, this is certainly interesting. This explains why he's so chummy with the Emperor. I thought His Majesty just kept him close due to his usefulness in making weapons, but that's definitely Agathoth with Vox Zozoth before he became Emperor. So these two have a history. This doesn't explain why Agathoth would plot something behind the Emperor's back. If anything, it contradicts that theory. Unless... Huh? Who would be calling me at this hour? Major Noggos speaking. Who is this?
Ah, Noggos. Glad I got a hold of you. I was worried I called too late. It's me, Colonel Agathoth. I heard you were asking about the Borzax operation, and got kinda caught up in all that bureaucratic nonsense. So, I figured I'd call you myself and fill you in on what you needed to know. I know how annoying it can be getting information from the Hall of Records, so I figured I'd help you out.
You heard I was asking about it.
Yeah, nothing gets past me, I guess. Anyway, you wanted to know something about the op?
Yes, well, I wanted to know...
Oh, hey, sorry to interrupt, but you're gonna get a kick out of this. It's the craziest thing. I got a couple of furballs here I'm testing my new battleship cannon on, right? And I swear, one of these furballs looks like the feline version of that son of yours. You know, the one who just enlisted. I think he's being assigned to work under me too. Isn't that the craziest thing? So, anyway, what did you want to ask?
That's okay. It wasn't that important anyway.
Oh, okay then. Anyway, how about this? I'll try to see if I can't get an unredacted copy of the report sent to your office. I'll call you again to make sure it got there, okay? Okay. See ya. Alrighty then. Let's get started.
At the house, Ixia's just finished explaining everything that's happened up until this point in regards to Borzax. However, unfortunately, they don't know where Ixia's parents are, only that they left. Apparently, when Ixia was drafted, her parents went berserk, one of them even attacking the officers. They weren't heard from for 4 days in a row, up until her aunt came wearing an Imperial uniform. After the aunt left, Ixia's parents came over to the neighbor's house the next day, saying they had to go away for a while and needed them to take care of the place while they were gone. They haven't come back since. Apparently, the day right after they left is the day that the Imperial supply transports were bombed. It's suspected that they joined the Resistance, but the problem is Resistance groups usually take credit for their attacks. But despite it being a huge story, nobody did. With no leads though, there's not much the crew can do. And so Ixia heads upstairs to pack what she wants to take with her from her childhood. Mostly plushies. Not much to mention here except for a little fun fact about this scene, where Ixia winds up a music box that she takes with. According to the sheet music scene in the background here, it plays You Are My Sunshine, which adds a little bit of depth given the context. Her parents were racked with grief and joined the rebellion because they took their sunshine away. A bit of a problem with the Van Boys though. Turns out they're debating whether they should tell Ixia that her parents are heroes among the Resistance, as the problem is nobody's seen them in a year and a half. Problem though, a certain member of the Punishment Squad happened to overhear the entire conversation. Turns out someone heard the van pull up and saw Ixia and the others break in, causing them to call the authorities. Unfortunately, it was too dark for a license plate, so Shogun's here to get it out of them. I'm gonna be honest, this is the darkest scene in the series so far, as Shogun goes in great detail about how, although the rebels are going to be killed for insubordination anyways. If they don't cooperate, then after they're killed, they'll be reported missing instead, resulting in them not turning themselves in within 72 hours, and their families being killed off as well thanks to the 72-hour policy. Anyways, we cut away back to the Cloudscratchers. Don't worry about if they're okay. We don't ever see them again because they got sent to a nice farm with lots of pancakes. Yeah. But anyways, they're walking back to the ship, with Ixia feeling a bit solemn about their home. However, before they can board the ship, they're quickly attacked. Borzax sent up an ambush.
I don't understand, sir. You had the drop on them. Why not take down the ship?
Our target isn't the ship, you dolt. We're here for the girl. If we take out the ship, she could run off and hide anywhere. That ship is where she's headed. That's her safe zone. She wants to escape after all. If we know where she'll run, we know where to aim our guns now, don't we? We let the ship stay in one piece for now. Use it as bait to keep her in our sights. I want you and all available Vipers out there now. Swarm them, shoot the girl, and take out anyone that gets in your way.
Yes, sir.
What was that? Did you see where it came from?
It came from that direction, and I think I see something moving over there. It looks like... Oh no.
Hey there, kiddies. Guess what? It's that time again. That's right. It's playtime with Uncle Borzax.
Oh crap, this is bad.
Borzax? How did he... Never mind that. No time to waste. We gotta move. Tell Burt and Jacques to get in their planes. Guns mounted, and keep those planes off us. I'll handle the Cloudscratcher itself. We need to get Ixia aboard and get out of here.
Yes, sir.
And Alice, we're gonna need you out there for this one too.
Borzax is the only one here, though, as Shogun has arrived too alongside his punishment squad. Ixia isn't giving up yet, though.
Felix, do you trust me?
Yeah?
Do you trust me?
I said yes!
Then climb on my back, and whatever you do, don't let go.
What are you doing?
Escaping.
Ixia is an agile little super soldier, so they're easily able to bounce out of there. In the skies, Burt and Jacques are having a showdown against the Silver Viper soldiers. It's here that Jacques is letting it all out, about his home being overtaken, stolen, and filled with Imperial flags. Borzax, of course, sees this as an opportunity to get inside his head, causing Jacques to get vulnerable and not plan accordingly. He's taken down. The fight isn't over for him yet, though, as soon as he touches the ground, he demands Scotty puts guns on a spare plane, now. Ixia has made it back to the surface and is using vines to Tarzan swing to the hangar by swinging on an Imperial plane. Damn, girl!
Borzax, you idiots! Now she's aboard their ship. We would have wrapped this up by now if it wasn't for you. I want all forces managing lockdown to return to the ship and put in a request for a direct line to the Emperor. What the?
Whoops. Sorry, Colonel. Straight gunfire. You know how it is.
I'll have you court-martialed for this. You, your commander, and your whole lousy squadron.
Oh, Colonel, I am so sorry. Truly, Captain Archethonus was being incredibly reckless. I can promise you that he will be properly punished for his actions. Switch to private frequency. Ahem. Captain?
Yes, Commander?
I think you're about due for a pay raise.
So anyways, Alice keeps taunting Borzax, and eventually the Silver Vipers are forced to fall back.
Looks like we scared them off.
Well, that wasn't hard at all, was it?
You two have to get back to the ship, now!
Jacques? I don't understand. What's wrong?
Listen to me. Borzax isn't calling them back because he's giving up.
This is the same thing he pulled back at Cochandale. At one point, we thought we were winning. We thought we had him pushed back. He even recalled all his Silver Vipers, like he was preparing to retreat.
And then?
And then the hatches opened.
Now who's outgunned, you furry little scum sucker?
Oh, crap.
Quick, get back to the Cloudscratcher.
This is bad. Everyone aboard the ship! Get away from the windows and find cover! Now!
Everybody quickly gets on board as Borzax starts firing. The ship's taking bad hits, but it's managing to hold on thanks to Felix's armor plating he made last night. The Berserk manages to shoot down the Cloudscratcher enough for it to fall under the cloud bed. Unfortunately for Borzax, he starts glowing too early, and it's too late by the time he realizes they didn't fall. They dove, as they just barely managed to escape.
There it is. We got them. Which direction are they headed?
Well, sir, unfortunately we can't tell. We're only able to get video from this one spotter, and even then all the pressure down there is interfering with all its other sensors. All we're getting is a video feed. We don't even know which spotter this is. None of their internal GPSs are responding. What should we do, sir? Sir?
Cloudscratchers!
And just like that, we end the chapter with Ixia officially joining the Cloudscratcher crew. We open up some new faces. There's a crew of pirates who apparently just robbed Captain Blackheart and stole his prized possession. Instead of laying low like his lackeys are suggesting, this captain is insistent on celebrating by pillaging and getting even more riches.
Well, sir, I don't mean to be I don't mean to be rude, sir, but won't starting a big fuss right after stealing from Captain Blackheart lead his crew right to us?
Garfunkel, you silly little man. Let them come. Let anyone try and stop me. For the spirits of failure shall be their guide into the field of battle. The sword of victory has been placed firmly in our hands. All shall be smote by the dread pirate, Wolfsbane!
On the ship, Ixia is helping Felix do some repairs on the FC engine. We actually get a bit more world building here. Something I've been neglecting to mention up until now is that there are different types of clouds in this universe. You got your normal white clouds, solid clouds which are a pinkish red color, and these green clouds are called float clouds, which are the most valuable material in the world because they're what allow ships to float. In order to control it, they use a float cloud engine, which adds and subtracts moisture as needed so they can rise or descend. Though it's dangerous to work with them mid-flight, one wrong move and they're all dead, which is naturally intimidating to Ixia. Felix is pretty chill about it though, because he's done this a million times. Though he doesn't really catch the hint and continues about how if you add too much moisture, it could storm out like a storm cloud and completely combust.
Hey Felix?
Yeah?
Next time I help you fix something, remind me to never ask what it does or anything about it ever again.
Okay, your loss.
Turns out the FC engine only needed a quick tune-up, so they're finished earlier than expected. As they walk, Ixia goes on about how they're glad to not be working with Borzax, as she would have had to spend her birthday with him and the military of all people. So it turns out her birthday is only in a few days. Felix panics as she wants to get her something but has little prep time. Despite Ixia reassuring that she doesn't want anything and that getting to be part of the crew is a gift enough, Felix bolts out of there. In a room on the ship, Delila and Alice are talking about Burt. For context, Burt's super into babes but gets none. Apparently Burt's been making some not so subtle moves towards Alice, which she finds flattering even if she doesn't return the feelings. As they're talking, Ixia comes in asking if they know where Felix went and explains the situation. We get a little exposition that Felix loves birthdays and does his best to give everyone a good birthday present because he never knew when his own was due to his parents being killed at such a young age. We shoot back to the Margoth Empire again, where we see Major Shogun. Apparently the Emperor is sending a call, which is mildly infuriating because Shogun has been trying to call them for weeks. The call starts up, but this isn't the Emperor. Their name is Carmen Thoa, and they're the Emperor's assistant. Shogun isn't the most pleased by this, but is eventually forced to deal with it. As it were, no action will be taken against Commander Borzax for his insubordination. However, Shogun and the Punishment Squad are still being ordered to find Ixia and capture alive to be publicly executed. Captain has been caught up about Ixia's birthday. As they're theorizing what Felix is gonna do, Felix arrives as eccentric as always. He's finally come up with the perfect idea for Ixia's birthday. Seeing as he has a lot of allowance saved up, and seeing as they're heading to Bellamore, a notoriously posh, fancy city, Felix plans to pamper her with a night out at a fancy diner.
So, you want to take her on a date?
Yeah, her birthday. When else would I take her? Anyway, I gotta start planning for Ixia's birthday dinner. See ya!
Well. Taking Ixia on a classy birthday dinner date, eh? Your son's quite the Casanova, isn't he?
You shut your mouth.
We switch to a new scene with some romantic couple trying to get away from their parents by going to a more remote location. However, to their surprise, the place seems to have a ship, despite the place having supposedly been abandoned for years. Unfortunately for them, this is the hideout of Captain Wolfsbane, to which he gladly takes them along as hostages. In his usual melodramatic flair, Wolfsbane announces that in just 2 days they'll pillage Bellamore for all it has.
We shall pillage the village and cover wealth from the spillage. When asked to define the term ransack, historians will point to this operation as the example. The definition of pirate shall be removed from the dictionary and replaced simply with a photo of this crew. For this is all that shall ever need to be said on the matter of what does it mean to be a pirate. Bellamore shall forever be haunted by the name of the dread pirate, Wolfsbane.
And honestly, I gotta say, Wolfsbane is an incredibly entertaining antagonist to watch. Even if I still prefer Borzax, you can definitely tell the author's been improving when it comes to writing that classic cartoon villain. Maybe it's just because I have a sweet spot for those so cocky they don't realize they're an idiot type villains, but it's very endearing. It makes for a villain you can't wait to see what they do next and simply love to hate. Anyways, Ixia is told about the whole date thing and is teased by Delila until they're bright red. And not too long after, they're in Bellamore, and Felix is ready to put his plan into action. He has the ladies take Ixia to see the sights sights of the city while he goes to buy a nice and fancy suit for himself. I'm gonna mostly skip over this scene, but Soggat learns of the wonders of pretzel bites with cheese filling, and there's this gag where Soggat keeps buying more and more and winds up with a whole arm's worth of them. Eventually, they meet up at the diner, and it seems Ixia's been getting dressed up too. But before they enter, we get a little scene with Noggos again. Back at home, he's arguing with one of his sons because after he found out his son would be working under Agathoth, who again is a psycho, he's worried about his son going into war. But at the same time, he can't say the exact reason. But during this conversation, what do you know? Agathoth brings up Noggos again. And what a coincidence! The area he's walking through happens to be the school his granddaughter goes to. And he puts her onto the phone. This scares Noggos enough to finally relent and let his son go to war. We switch back to inside the diner. Unfortunately, they didn't let Felix bring his lucky wrench to the table, but other than that goes pretty well, with Felix talking about his dreams and aspirations. Turns out he wants to build a Gundam and his dream ship. They also pretty quickly take off some of the things the adults made them wear, like makeup and hair gel, so they can just be themselves. During this, Ixia reveals some of their insecurities, particularly that being drafted at such a young age makes them feel like they can't just be how they want to be anymore. That they can't just be a girl anymore. Also, another little interesting thing, despite the fact this comic chapter was made in 2015, they actually slip in something that strongly implies Felix supports trans rights. When Ixia says they don't really feel like a girl, Felix's immediate follow-up question is if they feel like a boy instead. For context, this panel was posted around the same time as a lot of pretty anti-trans 4chan stuff was popular, so yeah, subtle, but very cool, Felix. Your father taught you well. But anyways, Ixia's insecure about the fact they're super muscly due to all their training as a soldier. Felix counters this, saying that they look beautiful just the way they are, that isn't the Margoth Empire that gets to decide who she is, but herself who does. Over on the captain's side of things, they're picking up an order of weapons. They're pretty quick to notice that Stanley, this frog guy over here, has upped their prices, which Stanley defends because apparently there's been a group called the Leatherbacks that's been causing problems with the trade routes. And to make it worse, his warehouse was robbed and has nothing left inside but a single ball with their insignia plastered on it. As they're about to leave, some folks are making a ruckus, firing shots in the air as they drive recklessly. They're very suspicious and unnerving. With this, the captain decides it might be a good idea to go pick up Felix and Ixia from their date. Back at the restaurant, we get a peek behind the counter. Our chef, as posh as he is, initially refused to serve them because they wanted something from the breakfast menu. That is, until the waitress reveals that Ixia's ordering.
It cannot be. You are certain it is her?
Positive. And the boy she's with? Same tail as the one peeking into the photo.
I cannot believe this! My savior is here, in my restaurant! Not only will I make her breakfast meal, their meal shall be on the house. After what she has done for me, for my family, I would be a monster to demand money from her. My family and I just barely escaped from the Empire when they took over my country. And if it weren't for her, they would have taken my new home as well. A hero like her shall never pay a dime in my restaurant, and I would be honored to deliver her pancakes myself.
Are we expecting a delivery?
No, go tell them to shoo.
The pirates break in, tie up the staff, and demand everyone empty their wallets. They quickly get to work at plundering everyone, and Ixia starts trying to strategize. Before they can tell Felix to stay put though, he's already gone.
Alright, plebs. Make with the shinies, and make it quick. I don't like to be kept waiting.
You're ruining my friend's birthday!
Shine on, harvest moon.
Hurry! You little punk, did you do this, huh? Answer me, kid. Think you're a real big shot, don't ya? See if you still got that attitude when I put this sword through your skull!
Don't touch him!
Huh?
Ha ha! Anyone who tries to lay a hand on my friend has to go through me first.
You are so cool, it's unreal!
Nothing to do but gift wrap these guys for the police. Let's go free the people they tied up. Then we can use all that rope they were kind enough to bring us.
How thoughtful of them. We better tell Delila what happened too.
Across the street, Sally and Jacques are betting on pool. Jacques lost. Burt is trying to flirt with the ladies at the bar when suddenly, another robbery.
And I suggest you don't try anything funny. First person who wants to try and be a hero is leaving in a stretcher or a body bag.
Yeah! We ain't playing around here. You know who you're dealing with? We're the Wolfsbane Pirates, and we're here to celebrate our captain's latest victory. Yeah!
We're having a little fundraiser for a party in the captain's honor. We'll be passing out a collection plate, and we expect everyone to be very generous. Got it?
Yeah! We're all about rewarding people for their generosity. For instance, if you're generous, we'll let you keep your head attached. Yeah!
Look, buddy, I don't pretend to know what's going on in those pea-sized brains you creeps got. But if you think you're gonna get away with this, you and your captain are painfully mistaken. You get what I'm saying?
Ooh. Tough talk coming from a guy who's about to get his jowls cut off if he keeps running his mouth.
Yeah! After Burt gets smashed against a table, Sally Jean happens to come back from the bathroom and wipes the floor with them. This gives the others a chance to start fighting back too.
Didn't your mama ever teach you any manners? Honestly, calling a bovine lady a cow like that. The nerve of some folk.
Not so fast, you jerks! You're gonna pay for what you did to Biggie. Eat this! Uh-oh. It would appear that I should have expressed my jubilation in a manner that was perhaps a bit more conservative with my ammunition.
It would appear that way, wouldn't it?
Back to Captain, he's driving with Alice. As they talk about how the crew might need a vacation or something, as they keep going, it takes an especially grim note. As Alice admits, she feels that the world has been overtaken by monsters. First with the new emperor making the rebellion's job harder, then the pirates getting a new leader, and the leatherbacks taking over all organized crime. The captain agrees to some extent, but explains that the reason they even have the resolve that they do is Felix and the desire to give him a good world to grow up in. However, he's surprised to find that the diner is covered in police activity and crime tape. There was a pirate attack here and the captain is panicking a bit. The police say there are no kids there, but the police captain tells him that the witnesses say there were 2 kids that were there when the pirates attacked and that they were in fact the ones to fend them off. Just as they're discussing it, Felix and Ixia arrive, shouting that Delila's been kidnapped and the captain might have an idea of where she may be being held, the warehouse. And so they're off on a rescue mission. On the pirates' side though, they're gloating to themselves about their success. The Delila isn't gagged and as such takes the opportunity to show their lack of fear despite being in very real danger. I can't tell if that's badass or makes me very concerned for her mental health.
Yeah, enjoy him while you got him, jerk. Your luck's about to turn sour real quick.
What the? Why is the hostage talking? Why have you neither gagged her physically nor gagged her metaphorically with stifling fear?
You have no idea who you're messing with, do you? Buddy, you picked the wrong day to raid this city.
Oh yeah? And what's so special about today? Who am I messing with that I should be so afraid of?
Ever hear of the Cloudscratcher crew?
Huh? Of course I have! The ones who defeated one of the Empire's best commanders, all by themselves. Real big shot. You mean you're one of...
Uh-huh.
And they're gonna come try to save you?
Afraid so.
This is fantastic news! Why, this day just keeps getting better!
Come again?
I was already planning on selling the lot of you to the leatherbacks. After all, they've made the slave trade a lucrative market these days. Each one of you is already worth a pretty penny. But for a big-name catch like you, they'll pay me more money than I know what to do with. And if I can capture your friends, I might make enough for an early retirement.
Leatherbacks? Come on now. You don't want to get involved with the leatherbacks, do you? I mean, how do you even know you can trust people like them, right? You know what I mean. Guys like that, they'll stab all you guys right in the back if they can make a few extra bucks off it.
What are you, some kind of moron? Every pirate knows they can trust the leatherbacks with anything. They're professionals.
Ain't no money in crime without the leatherbacks these days.
Plus, they're the most secure people to do business with. And in these troubling economic times, you need a criminal organization you can trust.
Girlie acts like she knows anything about pirating.
Not only that, I happen to be friends with their boss. We still play golf every so often. Surprisingly fun sport considering how boring it is to watch. So yes, I trust them. I'm selling you to them, that's that.
You act like you'll get the chance. My crew has 3 decorated military veterans, a mechanical genius, a bovine that's even stronger than usual, and a super soldier. You might want to let us go now before you gotta deal with that.
Yeah? Well, we have Big Brocky, so we win.
Big what now?
Anyways, outside the facility, the cops show up to distract the pirates in the front, while the Cloudscratchers come in through the back. Before Wolfsbane can get the hostages out, the Cloudscratchers arrive. Wolfsbane sends in his best men, but when it does very little, and the crew is able to free Delila, they send out Big Brocky.
Foolish peons of the Cloudscratcher crew, I invite you to pray to your god of choice. Ask him for help, plead to him for guidance, but do so knowing your god has forsaken you. How do I know this? Because he has placed you square in the sights of the Wolfbane Pirate's ultimate weapon, Big Brocky!
That doesn't look good.
Everybody, stay together. Look sharp.
We better get out of here ourselves.
Good idea.
Whoa!
Whoa, look at that!
Simon, Garfunkel, take them out!
Yes, Captain.
Let's see how you like this.
Engaging body writing anti-tipping protocol.
Well, it was worth a shot. Thanks.
No problem. Listen, I think I have an idea for taking this thing out, but I need your help.
Whatever you need, kiddo.
Quick! Everyone get behind the stolen goods!
Look at them run, scatter like cockroaches. How pathetic, how quaint, how delightful.
Captain, they're hiding behind the loot.
Well, just go around it and get them, you dummies.
Yes, Captain.
What are you idiots doing?
We don't know, sir. None of us hit anything, I don't think.
Steering feels like it's getting worse, too. Like trying to control a stubborn berth.
Over here, you big hunk of scrap metal.
Looks like the cowgirl wants another crack at us.
What?
Quick, toss it over here.
Right.
Oh, come on!
Way to go, kid.
Couldn't have done it without you. What the?
Please, you don't understand. I can't go to jail. I won't last a week. I'm too pretty for prison.
I'm not telling you again. Get in the car.
Yes, explosions. We need backup down here now.
Officers!
What are you doing here?
You need to get everyone away from this warehouse! They've got a...
What is that?
Big Brocky.
Big what?
There is no escape from the might of the Wolfsbane pirates. And should the long arm of the law stand in our way, we shall chop it off. Let the public be disarmed in the wake of our warpath.
Huh? What's going on? What's wrong with it?
What?
I am the Lord of Machines!
Felix!
What? When did you get in there? That was dangerous. You could have been hurt. You could... That's my boy.
Oh, so you think everything's so hunky-dory now, do you? Do not go quietly into that good night. Rage! Rage against the dying of a light. That's just a little quote I came up with to describe how you'll never take me alive, coppers.
Put down the... Everyone get down!
Luckily, they weren't real grenades, only smoke bombs, but unluckily, they all escaped, even the ones they just arrested. However, the good news is everyone's safe, and they have a happy reunion. Later that night, they're talking about what just happened. Ixia reveals another thing about their drafting days, where they were given a drug that allowed them to perceive time slower. Before they head off to bed, Felix has one last surprise for Ixia.
Ta-da! I saw this little fella in a store window on my way to the restaurant and thought it'd be perfect for you. Plus, I had some extra spending money, so how could I not pick it up? I mean, what are the odds, huh? That's like the picture-perfect gift for you, right? I just had to snatch it up as soon as I noticed it. I was like, Ixia's gonna love this. She is!
Well, I guess it's not just a ship anymore. We cut back to see how the pirates are doing in their real hideout. Still a little ashamed that their plan was a bust, but even so, they still have the treasure they stole from Captain Blackheart. Well, until some of Blackheart's men arrive, and they want that Heart of Darkness back. Eventually he relents, though apparently the reason Wolfbane is so feared isn't because of any of the smarts on his end, as we could tell, but because the captain's buddies with the leatherbacks, which are powerful. We also get a little Noggos intermission. Some powerful men want to talk. Now I skipped over it before, but this Black Snake guy is a really powerful spy rebel with his own group of agents, but I skipped over it because it didn't really introduce much, other than that this guy's been keeping an eye on Noggos' recent activities. Noggos is really upset by this sudden appearance in his house, and because he's a man of the rebellion, but the man informs him that he shouldn't call anyone because his phone's been bugged anyways. That's how Agathoth knew he was trying to stop his son from going to the war, and it also turns out that the Fieldsburg report that Noggos is trying to dig into and report to the Emperor was actually done by the Emperor himself. In fact, Noggos was a pawn this whole time, and everything he's done up until this point was planned and accounted for.
I can't. You're just lying!
Come on, Noggos. You and I are both all too familiar with how awful of a man Voxoth is. The minute you started poking around, he knew he could use your family to keep you quiet. You served your purpose to him, and after that, he made sure you'd be out of sight and out of mind. He just wants you to sit down, shut up, and wait until the next time he needs you for something. You know as well as I do that to him, you're not in the Margoth Empire military. You're in his military. There is no Margoth Empire in his eyes. You're all just his property. You exist to serve his interests, not your country's. Your country doesn't matter. Only he matters.
I just wanted to help take the land that belonged to us, to make a better future for my family. to bring a little glory to my homeland. Now a psychopath is holding my son hostage because the man I've pledged my loyalty towards told him to just because he wanted me to shut up. And I can't even save my own son, because if I do, then I'm putting my granddaughter in danger. All because I tried to do the right thing.
I know. It's all so terribly twisted. Heck, the entire nation has become twisted. Blackmailing its own officers, secret operations, genocide campaigns. All the psychos and ex-cons the Emperor has enlisted. This isn't the Empire it used to be. Now, maybe you understand why I did what I did, and why I'm inviting you to join me.
Join you?
Of course. You and I have a lot to offer each other. I have the resources necessary to relocate your entire family somewhere safe. Somewhere Voxazoth can't reach them. That includes your son in the military. Whereas you have quite a bit of knowledge that would greatly benefit my organization. Especially your knowledge on the Emperor's martial arts. You used to be an instructor for several special ops units before you became Conquest active. So I'm sure you know the secrets behind that fighting style. The one they teach the elites, the Royal Guard, the kids in Agathoth's program. Perhaps you could train a few of my operatives in it. And in return, I can help you serve your country in the greatest way possible by taking down the devil that rules
it. I never thought I'd be shaking hands with you, of all people.
I knew you'd come around eventually.
And now we reach the final storyline that we'll be talking about, Treasures of the Avians. We start out with these agent ladies walking down the city. There's a bit of vague talk regarding how they're not allowed to let Ixia know they work with their parents. Their plan? Let the Cloudscratchers in on a secret Imperial operation and see what they do with it. Felix, Ixia, the captain, and Sally are all winding down at a restaurant in La Rosa, or at least attempting to. But as it were, the people there aren't too accepting of serpents. As they're starting to eat, the agents arrive with a briefcase, and after they introduce themselves, deliver it to them saying it has vital information and that they may do what they will with it. Ixia, as predicted, asks about if they know who their parents are, and as instructed, she lies. We get to see how the Empire is doing, and as it happens, they've just made a new super weapon that freaking blows up an entire mountain. These weapons use a special source from an ancient avian civilization, however they take days to recharge, so the Empire is being tasked with finding more of these batteries. It isn't long for the Empire to summon our favorite grumpy serpent to take on the job, as Borzax is tasked with taking himself, his men, and the Emperor's assistant alongside this new face, the gargantuan Caxtur, this bulky Goliath of a man. Back on the Cloudscratcher crew, they're discussing the briefcase's contents, which details the very same mission we saw Borzax receive, and they plan to get there a day sooner to get the batteries before they can even get the chance. When Delila casts out, worried it may be a trap, the captain announces that they think they knew who gave them the information, a rebel group known as the Union. Basically, it's an unnamed rebel group that takes other rebel groups into itself and supplies them with almost military-grade weapons, supplies, and whatever you need.
So how do you know it's them?
Well, according to everyone we know who've been approached by them, the Union representatives are always women in black suits. Particularly attractive women in black suits.
I knew I should have gone with you guys to lunch today.
Seeing as they're going to an avian civilization, they have Alice teach Felix and Ixia about the history of the avians. To sum it up, the avians were a highly technologically advanced pacifistic species from over 300 years ago. The only people they didn't interact much with was the Sky Kingdom, what is now known as the Margoth Empire. The serpents, seeing the avians as an enemy, secretly built a war machine and a military campaign to eliminate them entirely. Although the avians were more advanced, the serpents were more experienced with war, taking down whole cities until they sealed themselves away underground for several years. However, the serpents were approached by a frog scientist known as the Plague Doctor in return for asylum. He created the first ever chemical weapon dubbed Toxic Toast for having a smell similar to toasted bread. This toxic toast would cause those affected to go mad with rage, neglecting all of their needs to kill anyone unaffected by it. About a year after the attacks, the Margoth Empire was finally able to get one of the tombs open, only to find everyone inside was already long dead. The resting place covered in purple residue from the toxic toast bombs. This is all told to them to explain what the odd purple residue is and why they shouldn't touch any of it. Due to how long it's been, it isn't as potent, however it can still make them irrational or violent. All of the crew have been instructed to use these wipes as a means of protecting themselves should they suddenly feel angry or annoyed without reason. And from there we meet another new character. This lady right here is named Nina. They're a treasure hunter that apparently sells her goods to someone named Martini, It turns out Nina's also hunting for the batteries. As it happens, they've heard the Cloudscratchers as they've just blown their way into the building. Also, the crew's been ordered to be stocked with lots of wipes and meat for some reason. We'll get into that later. Oh yeah, and remember Scotty? You know, that guy we briefly met at the very beginning for his introduction and then haven't seen since? Yeah, he's here too, but he's being left behind. He's supposed to man the turrets or something. More importantly, Delila has been told to stay back as well to keep an ear out for Imperial signals through the radio. They make their way inside the ruins where they see plenty of sentinels. Basically, they can't turn the power on or these robot guys will try to kill them for being intruders. This is also where we get the reveal that Soggat's the ship's doctor. But then, oh no, Nina turned the power back on.
Why'd the power turn on?
Maybe there was a surge, or something crumbled onto a switch and kicked it on?
You think it's a double cross?
Doubtful. After all the effort they went through to track us down and get us that info, they wouldn't lure us into a trap as simple as this. Someone else got wind of this place. Someone who doesn't want us here.
Maybe it's ghosts. Maybe this place is haunted. Does toxic toast make you stay crazy as a ghost? How do ghosts work?
I don't think it's ghosts.
Run, now!
They run deeper into the facility to the main lobby. However, they quickly run into another sentinel. Luckily, Sally Jean is able to take it out, but Ixia's hands get pretty badly bruised up in the process. We switch back to the Imperial perspective, but not Borzax and friends yet. This villain seems to be an assassin of some kind, in contact with the Emperor themselves, notifying them that two unrelated parties are already here, Nina and the Cloudscratchers. The Emperor, however, insists not to eliminate them unless they make their way down to the underground mainframe. Back to the Cloudscratchers, they've successfully escaped the sentinels and made it to the outer section of the facility. As Soggat is treating Ixia, a Rafus emerges from the bushes. This is what they brought the meat for. Basically, when the light is on, they're hunting, but when it's off, they'll for the most part leave you alone. In order to maximize the batteries they can collect, they split into groups. Burt and Jacques are taking the east side, Soggat and Sally Jean are staying in the general center area, and Ixia and Felix are taking the west side. Though he says to destroy any sentinels they see, and order Felix not to tinker with them, seeing as they're on a time crunch. Nina is astonished that they didn't run away after the sentinels woke up, but eventually settles on the idea this could actually be a good thing, as they can do the hard work of collecting the batteries, and she can just steal them from them once they've collected them all. Now that the group's split, we get a peek at each of them in their own scenes. Starting with Felix and Ixia, where, who could have guessed it, he finds a sentinel and wants to take it apart. He claims that he's dismantling it though, seeing as they're supposed to take them apart anyways. So while he's doing this, Ixia asks some questions about Felix, and we get some more insight into Felix's character. Specifically, we get some insight into why Felix likes machines so much. Mostly it's just because of how fascinating they are, how it's a bunch of seemingly different parts coming together to one goal, just like their crew themselves, and on top of that, there's nothing machines can't do. As he goes on about this, he finds a computer chip in it and decides to keep it because he's never seen anything like it and wants to dismantle it later to see how it works. We then go to Captain Alice's point of view, where they found their way to a production facility of some kind. They did pretty well so far, having a bag of batteries, only for Nina to swoop in and steal the whole thing. The captain puts two and two together and realizes she's the one to turn on the power, to which Nina reiterates that it wasn't to try and kill them, but for them to try and run away like a normal person. Eventually, she smoke bombs them and gets away.
I guess I was too distracted. Well, never mind. Luckily, I planned for something like this. Felix has been bugging me to make use of this for a while now.
You were going to say distracted, weren't you? And why, may I ask, were you distracted?
What can I say? I'm a single father.
Ha ha! You've got to be kidding me. You're turning into Burt now?
Not at all. Just a man whose son needs a mom.
Oh, so you'd want her to be his mom then?
Temporarily. Ow! Anyway, Felix designed these tracking devices a few weeks back. He keeps asking when I'm going to use them, so I thought it would be a good idea to put them in each of the battery bags in case something like this happened. With this, we can follow that thief, or at least find where she stashes the bag. There we are. Looks like she didn't get far. Let's go after her.
Think you can manage to keep yourself from letting her distract you again?
I promise. Scout's honor.
On Burt and Jacques' end, they're making their way down a large tunneled hallway. Eventually, they find themselves in front of a massive door, and oh, the Imperial assassins behind them, but they don't notice. Before they can notice them, though, Burt and Jack decide not to go down because the place looks too important. It's likely filled with sentinels, causing the mystery assassin to slip away, which pretty heavily implies that this leads to the underground mainframe the Emperor is wanting nobody to go down. Suddenly, the captain calls them, informing them of Nina, especially given Burt's weakness to attractive women. And I promise that, look, it's not me who's saying that. that, it's the characters, alright? Read the panel. I'm not that bad. I'm just keeping this authentic to the author's intention, you know? So you know what's going on. Anyways, we go from here to Sally Jean and Soggat, my beloved. We get some backstory on Soggat becoming a messenger priest. Turns out he used to be a surgeon, and when he became a messenger, his partner wasn't pleased because it made less money, and she divorced him. Welcome to the Duck Duck community, Soggat. Making their way through, they find themselves in a control room with a long-dead avian that's strongly implied to have sealed themselves away in here and eventually starved.
This is where the Tulip began. When the toxic toast with the plague doctor. This is when we fell. This is where the serpent people decided we were going to be monsters.
Soggat.
This is when we decided to wipe a whole race off the face of the planet just because we didn't like them. This is when we decided to start killing people. To start a death march over everyone with our scales. To kill women and children. And be proud of ourselves afterwards.
Come on now.
And it was all done in the name of Margaret, wasn't it? It's always us, and I'm just so tired of it.
Here, pal. You're looking a little shook up there.
Thank you, Sally Jean. I suppose this place is getting to me in more ways than one.
Hey, just remember, if you need protecting, a wipe, or heck, just a hug, I'm here to back you up.
And I appreciate it.
Back onto Burt and Jacques' side of things, and it seems like their luck has picked up. And they found plenty of batteries. A whole bag of them, in fact.
Looks like second time's the charm.
I'll say, that tunnel was a bust. This place was a treasure trove of batteries.
We're pretty lucky, too. Ain't seen one Sentinel since we split up from the group.
Yeah, the less of those we run into, the better.
What the?
Who are you?
Oh, me? Why, I'm just a sweet, innocent girl who decided to go exploring and got herself lost. So sad. If only I had some big, strong men who could help me.
Save it, thief. We know exactly who you are.
And now, Jacques, let's, hear the lady out.
Well, I was hoping I'd find someone who could help me, but I didn't expect him to be so big and strong and so handsome.
Well,
Burt.
I mean, carrying around a big bag full of treasure so casually? You must be so strong and manly. Be honest. How much do you work out?
Well, you know, I try and do what I can to stay fit.
I bet you do.
He's clearly the thief, Burt.
Hey, why don't you let me hold that treasure for a sec?
I don't know, it's pretty heavy.
Ooh, is it? Well, how am I gonna know how big and strong you are if I can't tell for myself?
Don't do it, Burt!
Well, maybe for just a second, but be careful now.
Oh, trust me, I will.
Burt!
Hey, look at that. It's not heavy at all.
Why didn't you stop me?
Why didn't you stop yourself?
You saw the body on her. You knew I was helpless.
The word you're looking for, Burt, is hopeless.
Just don't tell the captain what happened, okay?
You won't find out anything happened if we get those batteries back.
Good idea. Let's get her.
Back to Soggat and Sally, they found a sports stadium-like area. And even more importantly, they found a door that appears to be where the toast bomb first went off. Unfortunately, they accidentally opened it, causing Soggat to... well...
Holy moly! You alright, Soggat?
Do I look alright? I just got my face full of a chemical weapon, and you're stupid enough to ask me if I'm alright!
Come on, buddy. Just calm down and wipe yourself off.
Oh, is that who I'm supposed to do? I'm sorry. I forgot I was a gibbering cretin and needed everything explained to me like I'm 4 years old! How silly of me! It's bad enough I have to listen to that annoying hick accent of yours all day. But can you at least do me the small courtesy of talking to me like I'm an adult?
Look, I know that stuff is making you crazy, but you gotta listen to me and...
What did I say about talking to me like a child? Oh, what? You're gonna hit me now? Well, go ahead. Spider me across the walls. That's what you want to do, isn't it? You're sick of traveling around with a serpent, aren't you? I know how much you hate us. You all hate us. Yeah, that's right. Go ahead. Do it. What the... Get off me. Right now, do you hear me? Get off. Let me go. Let go. Let go, you go. Oh my gosh, I am so sorry.
And now we get the first look of how Delila and Scotty are doing. There's a small side plot they're having where Scotty doesn't care for music and Delila wants to find a song that will touch his soul. However, suddenly, Delila realizes the static coming from the radio is different. More like an approaching jamming field. Just to be safe, they call in the captain. Right back to Soggat and Sally. Soggat's still unbelievably sorry about what he said under Toast's influence. He can't get over how he felt, how he could think of nothing but pure unbridled hatred. But as they're leaving, Nina snatches the bag right from Sally's hands.
Well, the sooner we can put this here stadium behind us, the better. I've had enough of that bread smell to last me a lifetime.
Thank you for this generous donation. The Buy Nina a Solid Gold Hot Tub Fund thanks you for your contribution.
You take one more step with that bag and the next one's coming for your head.
Oh, right. Bovine strength. You may be stronger than me, but you know what you aren't?
What's that?
Faster. Pew!
What are you doing?
Ain't no way you losers are gonna reach that bag of goodies before I do. And by the time you get to it, I'll be long gone with it. Oh, you can try to hurl big objects at me like an animal, but I'm afraid you'll find me too nimble to hit when I'm not lugging around any loot.
Hey, a battery bag!
Looks like someone tossed it down here.
I know that voice.
Aha! I had a feeling it was you.
Thought you'd get away from us, eh?
Burt, boy, soon as I heard the captain's message, I knew you were gonna get your batteries snatched.
I have a weakness.
Well, I certainly am at a disadvantage now, aren't I? Well, guess this is it then. The end of the line. No way I'm getting out of this jam. It's game over for me. Guess I have no choice but to surrender. Oh wait, that's right. I can do this!
Not again.
Hey, what about our...
We return to see how Felix and Ixia are holding up. They're making their way to another point of interest while talking about more of the world building. Apparently in serpent culture, colors are pretty important. But skipping over that, we found our way at the Navadia Great Library. Before they can do anything else though, a horde of Rafus appear and are on the prowl. With how many there are, there's not nearly enough for all of them, and so they escape into the safety of the library. Inside is this little fella hiding away in a corner. Apparently these are called Tosu. Pufus are the flying variant, and Tosu are these spidery looking guys. Figuring it's starving, Ixia decides to part with a granola bar so the thing will live. They start looking through the library talking about the ancient books, and they find that the Tosu's following them now, which they decide they're going to take with them, settling on the name Pitterpat. Moving on, we meet another colorful cast of characters. This crowd guy named Jacques is absolutely losing his mind over an Imperial ship and is desperately trying to find Reeve. Apparently they tend to overreact a lot, so nobody's really taking it seriously. But once they get to Reeve, they're finally able to inform her that it's not just any Imperial ship, but the Berserk, the name of Commander Borzax's ship. And so Reeve commands him to drive the ship down there now before Nina gets themselves into even worse trouble. Basically, Reeve and these people are part of a group called the United Detective Organization, or commonly known as the UDO, or the Enforcers, who will go after the most wanted, criminals too slippery for local organizations, and bring them to justice. Even the Empire abides by them, surprisingly, but we open up to the Enforcers making their way to the Avian Ruins as well. But first, they're heading to let the Empire know they'll be operating and to turn their jammer off so they can communicate. On the Empire side of things, they're experimenting with liquid float-powered containers to hold the batteries in. Turns out Borzax has just been let in on the fact that Cloudscratchers are going to be here as well, though it's reminding to focus on the mission. As long as he's able to get those avian batteries, he's welcome to do his little revenge plot. Our other soldiers have eavesdropped on this, and are less than enthusiastic about meeting them again.
Them? Again? Okay, seriously, did we do something to make Margoth hate us? No, really, I'm asking. I mean, are they some kind of agents of Margoth's wrath sent to punish us? Cause I was always told he just struck you with lightning. And to be frank, I'd prefer the lightning.
No, we're not gonna give up. This isn't Margoth punishing us. This is him giving us an opportunity. This is gonna be the time we pull one over on them. Our time has come, comrades. Or we'll just get lucky and never run into them. Who knows?
The Emperor's assistant says they'll be heading with Caxtur to the library, while Borzax and crew get the batteries. Before they enter though, they hear a boom in the forest. This boom was from Reeve absolutely destroying this Mama Jamba. You know who else is here? Those ladies that gave the Cloudscratchers the briefcase containing the mission in the first place. And this dog lady over here is actually Blue Monday, the person the Emperor was talking about earlier saying to eliminate on sight. Back to the Enforcers, they've arrived at the Empire to inform them that they will be in the Avian Ruins too and to not interfere. Also, Reeve here is a master of Taekwondo and is able to do these air shockwaves with their hands and stuff. After they leave, Reeve also mentions that the Emperor's assistant was likely wearing steel-tipped gloves, which likely means they're a practitioner of the Quill Toth, which was a savage assassination technique. Also, if you feel like you're getting vertigo from the amount of times we're bouncing between character perspectives, you're not alone. For a total number of separate groups we've been following, we have the UDO, the Empire, Nina, the Assassin, the Agents, Felix and Ixia's group, Soggat and Sally's group, Alice and the Captain's group, and Burt and Jacques. That That's 9 separate groups that we keep bouncing between. And that's on top of all the world building dumps and brand new characters we've been getting. I mean, it's cool that the snake's culture uses color as a means of showing off specific traits, or that practitioners of the quill talk keep their arms behind their backs to show when they're sheathing their weapons, but a lot of this doesn't go anywhere and makes it hard to tell what information is important, and can make things harder to remember. It's like playing Russian roulette with Chekhov's gun. And it extra sucks when this is the best arc of the series in terms of already established characters. It's just that we hardly have any time to get invested in all these other characters we're being introduced to. Like, apparently this character's name isn't actually Reeve. Apparently Reeve is a title and their actual name is Calico. But seeing as the majority of characters just call her Reeve, I'm also just gonna call her Reeve. But the fact I couldn't tell without checking back to the character pages is quite the downgrade from before, where we got it all absorbed from just one read. Anyways, they arrive at the place and the feline kid, who's part feline, part bovine, is able to carve through the metal door before we get back to the Cloudscratchers. Apparently it has been a day since we last saw any of them, and while they were sleeping, the Empire has arrived and turned on the power, meaning they need to get out of there. Sally and Soggat find Burt and Jacques and wake them up too. There's pages upon pages of each of the groups taking out robots, and this dancing guy with the enforcers put a virus into the Sentinels, so they dance now. His name is Dan, I think. Also, remember the Plague Doctor from way back during the alien civilization? Well, it turns out he's alive 300 years later, and he's still working for the Empire. His name is Osbert, and he talks Shakespearean, and then he kills someone, and before we can learn literally anything else about him, we move on. Oh, and spoilers, he doesn't show up again this entire arc. You know, I'm starting to sense a pattern with this chapter. Anyways, we meet another 2 characters named Solstice and Mercury, who start to bazooka the section where the Empire is, causing them to flee while they have the others continue their mission of collecting the toxic toast dust. Back to the Cloudscratchers again, we follow Sally's group of 4. They're successfully fleeing until part of the bridge collapses, throwing Sally down into the water. She's okay and says she'll catch up. Soggat's worried and runs over to some other section to make sure they get out of here alive. And Burt and Jacques decide to keep going to the rendezvous point and come back for them later if they don't show back up. The enforcers are doing their thing when Felix and Ixia show up. Apparently Felix recognizes the feline bovine girl named Mila. There's some weird scene here where I guess Mila is in love with Felix, but then absolutely hates Ixia and calls her a homewrecker immediately upon seeing her. This doesn't really go anywhere though, because they get directions to the water treatment plant where they're supposed to meet up, and they're on their way. And then we're back to Blue Monday, who gets into an encounter with the assassin. But then we cut away before anything happens. I know I mentioned it already. God, this pacing is awful. It's like everything's going on all at once, and every scene gets 2 to 3 pages each before they move on to the next, so they can wrap up the 13 separate plots they made, with the 9 separate POVs that are all simultaneously connected and have nothing to do with one another at the exact same time. It probably doesn't help that in this chapter alone we've been introduced to 16 new characters, not including 6 additional people from scenes I left out because they added nothing to the plot. And I'm not talking background characters here, I'm talking characters that are given names and for the most part given plot relevance here. Back to the story though, we're with Nina, who's trying to head back to their ship and get their stuff. They encounter one of the dancing virus robots briefly, but then they enter this room and are met with Reeve, who was waiting for them there. And then we switch to a childhood scene with Nina and Reeve. Turns out even back when they were kids, they always had a conflict with one another because Nina was always more willing to take advantage of people, whereas Reeve was steered away by their strict moral compass. Back to the present, Nina's frozen in awe, whereas Reeve uses their powers to force her inside and shut the door. Nina tries to play the sibling card because she's Reeve's younger sister, and it fails. Reeve has made a technique that keeps criminals suspended in air vortex where they are stuck until she commands otherwise. And so she calls her in and plans to bring her in apprehended at the southern gate. Back to Felix and Ixia, they're still making their way through the facility. They're worried if they take too long that the captain will get worried, so they decide to take a shortcut through the dynamo core. We cut back to Blue Monday fighting the assassin, and they're duking it out. At some point, the assassin goes on about the art of death and how they would do anything to appease death itself, before Monday attacks him mid-monologue. The assassin's scythe can also separate by the blade into this chained weapon, which is neat, but then we cut away again back to the crew. We're finally back to Captain Alice, who are outside the facility. Burt and Jacques also successfully made it, but they're having no luck contacting Soggat via walkie-talkie. So the plan is simple. Burt and Jacques are going to put the batteries and the supplies back on the ship, and have Alice use the trackers to try and find Felix and Ixia. If she doesn't return by the time Burt and Jacques are back, the 3 of them will go and find them. They'll figure out Sally and Soggat after the kids are safe. Back to our agents, they make their way down to what the Empire is really after, collecting some data to cause some kind of Armageddon. However, they find Caxtur, you know, the big old Goliath guy. He goes on semi-sarcastically about the book he was reading and how he couldn't connect with it, while the agents are panicking because they were given direct orders not to fight him. One of them decides to go for a more indirect route and tries tries to take out one of the poles. However, they're easily able to stop the blow with his bare hands. And just like that, the fighting begins. They quickly find that none of their weapons work on him, and that wasn't an order not to fight him, but that they literally can't fight him. Suddenly, Sally Jean joins the battle.
Wait, is that?
What's she doing here?
Oh, a strong one, eh? I don't know what's going on here, but I can put 2 and 2 together. Pretty obvious who the bad guy in my way is. So move it! Nothing, but I put everything I had.
Get away from him!
Now then, where do we?
Slow your roll there, Stitch. Who said we was finished?
Cheeky little thing, aren't you?
And then we cut away from the middle of the battle sequence to finally reunite with Borzax, who's mocking the dead bodies and playing with their long dead corpses. Very charming.
Man, there's a lot of bones in here.
It would seem this was a shelter of some kind, but judging by the hole we came in from, it looks like the angry hordes broke through.
Margoth, I say. Can't escape your fate. Hey, Narcat, check out the ridiculous outfits they actually wore in public. They went outside wearing this. Yeah, real great civilization you got here. Running around dressed like whatever this is. Hey, you think if I ran some wires through this thing, it would make a good office decoration for Spirits Day? Never mind. Bunch of weaklings. You thought you could step in the Great Serpent Empire. Look how well that turned out for you. And look at this idiot! What were you even reaching for, stupid? There's nothing up here. Pathetic! Hey, Narcath, watch me send this one skull all the way to the other side of the...
Sir, are you...
Narcathoness, contact the Vipers. Tell every one of them in our area to meet me down here now.
Now to the newest characters, Solstice and Mercury. They're apparently a duo known as the Godspeed Unit, who are sort of boogeyman to the royal forces. As they battle, apparently the Godspeed Unit are making use of something to counter the slow ride the soldiers are on, allowing them to easily overwhelm the guards despite only being a team of 2. Basically, it's creating a noise that's constantly changing in length, pitch, and volume, so they can't tune it out, meaning the soldiers can't use their heightened reflexes, which is that thing Ixia can do where she can perceive time slower. The Emperor's assistant is finally able to turn off the machine causing the noises, and demand answers as to how they knew about the slow ride, to which they of course refuse. Deciding to handle this personally, they get ready to fight, which surprisingly, they're able to deflect a full-on Gatling gun as well as a throwing knife. Down at where Nina and Reeves are, they're making their way down to the precinct, having a heart-to-heart. Although Nina tries to keep things lighthearted, Reeves breaks down a little about how much Nina's criminal activities has torn their family apart and torn her apart as well. Nina seems to show very little self-reflection and breaks out of their handcuffs. Seeing as Reeves waited until she was inside to do the vortex thing, she's pieced together that she can't do it outside, and predicts she'll do a shockwave instead, which Reeves does, allowing Nina to fully escape by using it to propel herself away. The suspect has escaped. We're back to Felix and Ixia, who have made it to the Dino Core. Felix is absolutely fascinated by it. However, unfortunately, this buys Borzax just enough time to make it there to greet them.
Hey kid, what gives? I thought I was the one doing the insults here. But then you go and get a head start by insulting me!
Ixia!
Oh, did I never mention it around you? Before I became a commanding officer, I was Special Ops. And in case you didn't know, Spec Ops units got put through the same training Agathoth put you kids through. And yes, that means we were given Sloride, just like you. Not to mention, I was trained by Ironwall Noggos, the best instructor in the entire Empire. I'm bigger than you, stronger than you, better trained than you, and I've got years of combat experience on you to boot. You've enjoyed a physical advantage over everyone you've been beating up on so far, but against me? It's all gone, punk! You're just a small child trying to pick a fist fight with a soldier several times your size. All you've done is jump headfirst into a battle you have no hope of winning. But you have no idea how much I want you to try anyway.
He can fight like Ixia? So that means that Ixia can't. Come on, Pitterpat. We gotta do something to help her.
Whoops, missed. Ooh, just short. Come on, brat. I can do this all day. Give it another go. Let me slap the taste out of your mouth, you little...
Pitter-pat? Don't worry, Ixia! We got your back!
Stupid little...
Here, this is the biggest one I brought!
Thanks, Felix.
What in the world was...
I'm ending this, Borzax.
What is it with you, kid? You gotta take the fun out of everything. Quiet down and take your beating like a good little soldier. And as for you, boy, stay out of this! Oh, get lost, you pest! What? Look who's got themselves a second wind. You want to fight for real, huh?
Ixia! Someone help!
You know, I didn't think you had it in you. Certainly pulled that out of nowhere, didn't you? Where were you hiding that little burst of energy, huh? Wait a minute. Oh my God! You're a furry lover? Oh, good Margoth. I think I'm gonna be sick. You're in love with an animal? Of all the degenerate, you haven't kissed it, have you? My God, I'm gonna have to wash these gloves after touching you, aren't I? I'm about to do your parents a huge favor. Hopefully they don't know that their daughter's the most disgusting type of deviant there is. Trust me, kid, this is a mercy killing.
Back away from the girl, now!
We cut back to see how Sally, the agents, are faring.
Haha, yeah! How'd you like that, huh? What does it take?
More than you have. I must commend your tenacity, Sally Jane Peterson.
How'd you know my...
Although you pale in comparison to your father.
What was that?
Still, it was a good context. Wait a second.
Caxtur realizes that the agents are gone and dashes to the main room, leaving Sally temporarily in the dust. Up where the computer is, the agents destroy the main computer, but only seconds after the download has completed. They try to destroy the download terminal, however it's not made of any old metal, but Devonite, the strongest metal on the planet. Doesn't mean they're not gonna give up yet though.
Peterson! Forget him! If he leaves here with that data, we're finished!
What are you talking about?
If that data makes it back to the Emperor, it's all over. The war is over. This world is over. All of our lives will be over.
Though melodramatic, she does have a point.
Caxtur goes on about how they're all just mindless followers whose lives are only worth what they bring to the table. How unlike them, he chose to follow the Emperor, whereas they were destined to servitude. Sally manages to carry the pipe and swings at Caxtur. But when she goes in for the second hit, he throws it back at her, hitting her on the head and... oh.
Peterson!
Now then, are we finished with this farce?
Mean streets, take the girl and run.
Who are you?
Wait, aren't you with...
I am enemy to injustice. We shall leave it at that.
Oh, I recognize you. One of the Reeves men. Another follower. I thought I recognized that apparel. I must say, it's quite the novelty to encounter a member of your clan all the way out here. One of the street ninjas. Oh, no, you don't.
I am your opponent, monster. Way of the hustler.
Did you just do a double take? You didn't mishear that. Read the panel. That's an actual quote during one of the final battles immediately after someone died. Yeah. Anyways, they continue to battle, and the hustler guy named D-Pesh creates a circle of fire and engulfs their weapon in flame. And says, "Way of the hustler" again. This is what they say before every single one of their attacks, by the way. Well, for most of them anyways. At one point they switch to "Way of the Gangsta," to which Caxtur says they'll see if he's a true G or just a biter. What is this comic, man? A massive explosion happens, and guess what? Caxtur's still standing. But we cut back to Borzax and Ixia for now.
Hey, did you hear me? I said back away from the girl. Now!
I'm not sure what it is I did to please Margoth so much. If I knew what it was, I'd be doing it every day. First, I get to pound this treacherous, furry-loving brat into the dirt. Now this, the Cloudscratchers' very own smug little mutt. Oh, you have no idea how much I'm gonna love this!
Alice!
I'm gonna beat that ugly, hairy face of yours so bad, you'll physically never be able to smirk again. But don't worry, I ain't gonna kill ya. Not today. Oh no, I want you alive. So you can go back home, walk the streets of your hometown, so all the kids in the neighborhood can see what's left of your face and scream in terror! Your neighbors will beg you not to go outside. You're scaring the kids, you're scaring their pets, you're killing their appetite, and now they haven't eaten in weeks. I want you alive so you can live the rest of your miserable and pathetic existence alone and unloved, because no man could ever love a pulpy, deformed, barely recognizable shape of a person. Because after I'm done with you, you're gonna look like something out of a horror movie. No one will talk to you, go near you, even stand to look at you, let alone love you. I won't have to kill you, because you'll just kill yourself.
You done?
Huh? You're dead, dog.
Oh, did you expect me to recoil in shock or something? I can see the state Ixia's in, and there's no one else here. I figured you could do that super reflexes thing the minute I pulled this gun on you.
So then you know how futile this is. You know what I'm about to do to you. Good. At least you prepared yourself.
I did prepare myself, actually. Got a good look at the surroundings. For example, look at your feet.
Huh? You expecting me to trip over this hose? What the? You missed, huh?
Whoa! She got him!
You mutt! What is this? It burns! It stinks! What? What is this? I can't...
When Ixia joined the crew, our captain knew we'd have to go up against people capable of doing what she could do. So, he immediately had her share everything about her abilities with him. You need to concentrate to activate your super speed and reflexes. So to counteract that, we need to prevent you from concentrating. The captain came up with plenty of counter-Ixia strategies to deal with anyone who had her combat techniques. This is one of them. Gugo extract. You know, Gugos, those little critters that spray a stinky liquid at you for self-defense. Nasty stuff. Real hard to wash off. But here's the thing. What they spray at you is diluted from passing through their system. What's all over your face is pure, undiluted liquid extracted straight from their bodies. Stanley hooked us up with barrels of it. It's pretty rough for us canines. We've got a heightened sense of smell, after all. Even from over here, it's all I can smell. Burt, the captain, and I all had to train our noses to deal with the odor. First time that stink hit us, we all passed out. Can't imagine how bad it must be to have it all over your face like that.
I'm gonna kill...
It stinks so bad.
No, I'm taking the kids, and we're leaving. You make one move, and I shoot. Something tells me you won't catch it if I do.
Sorry, Commander, but clearly the fun is over. Now, if you'd be a dear and drop your weapon, that would be great.
Narkethinus, what are you doing here? I told you to stay behind until I called you.
Pardon me, Commander, but you've had a rather nasty run of bad luck with these people so far, and I thought it'd be best to step in before the trend continues. I must say it's quite the privilege to meet the Cloudscratchers ace. But we haven't been formally introduced. My name is Narkethinus, Captain of the Silver Vipers.
I take it you're the pilot of that silver fighter plane from back at Barbin? Hate to admit it, but you're good.
Why, thank you.
Enough! I want her dead now! And when you're done with her, put the brats out of their misery!
I don't think you want to do that. After all, if you kill me, how am I supposed to tell you all about the people who sent us here?
What are you talking about?
Come on, why would a small group of rebels even be here, collecting batteries? What use would we even have for these things? How else would we have even known you were here? Of course someone else sent us. To be honest, I don't trust them very much, so I don't exactly hold a ton of loyalty to them. And now their little errand for us has put these children in danger.
This could be a trick.
It could, but hate to admit it, the dog makes sense. As much as I want to crush her flea-bitten skull in my hands, I'd be a fool to pass up potentially good intel.
This is true, but what about these kids? I'm sure you'll take me away and interrogate me. I'm fine with that, but I need the safety of these children guaranteed. They walk, or I don't talk.
You'll talk or I'll splatter you and those brats all over these walls!
Oh, so you're not concerned with the women in black suits then?
And we cut back to Solstice and Mercury fighting the Emperor's assistant again, where he's reflecting bombs and using his assassination techniques on Mercury. Surprisingly, it doesn't work exactly as intended, though it definitely does injure him to the point where he'll need medical attention ASAP. Things are tense as they're both doing that anime thing where they yell their ideologies to each other. And then we cut back to Sally, who's now fine, I guess, and demands to be put down so she can fight Caxtur again. But first, she demands to know how Caxtur knows her father. They have no real connection, but Caxtur is the leader of the Black Fang, the Emperor's personal network of spies and assassins. Basically, he learned every bit of information about the Cloudscratchers after they were able to take down Borzax twice now and took in Ixia.
After your crew foiled Borzax twice and took in number 42, we took it upon ourselves to learn everything we can about you all. Like you, for instance. Sally Jane Peterson, age 32, eldest daughter of Buck and Kathy Peterson, born in the bovine nation town of Murdoch, Texada. You have two sisters, Billie Jane Peterson and Polaya Mae Peterson. You left the family farm when you were 26 years old to pursue your dream to own a restaurant. The family farm is now currently owned and operated by your sisters, who also tend to your ailing mother.
How?
Your best friend during your childhood was a girl named Maribel Blanchette, though the two of you would eventually lose contact. You have had a few brief romantic relationships in the past, but the only one that ever had lasted was with a boy named Bartholomew DeWitt, who has since died of the same disease that took your father.
Stop.
You joined the Cloudscratcher crew 3 years after leaving home, having failed to start your restaurant, after striking up a conversation with Captain O'Connell while you were working as a chef.
I said stop it!
Years of dealing with lower-ranked officers and squadrons seem to have given you a false impression of the Empire. You labor under the impression that you are capable of standing against us.
If this monster truly is invincible, then I have only one trick left to get us all out of here.
Ladies, I bid you farewell. Fear not, it will all be over in a quick, painless instant.
Finna, bounce!
What is this? More trickery? Is it all you have? How much more of my time do you plan to waste? You can only play White Knight for these women for so long. Huh? Blast it. Just as well. I've wasted far too much time playing with them as it is. Now then, to the Dynamo Core.
Escaping, they give up on the failed mission and instead try to get Sally back with their crew. Speaking of crew...
And the Lepidae girl? Big, floppy ears, I remember that. Might be from a tribe, not sure. One of them had a sword. Blue sash wrapped around it. Yeah, pretty sure. Third one. Sunglasses, I think? Yeah, real dark one.
Enough! Why do you keep talking like that?
Like what?
Why are you talking so slow? Ever since you started your story, you've been talking like a distracted 4-year-old.
She's stalling.
Stalling? How am I stalling? Who's stalling here? No one's stalling. You see anyone stalling?
Hands in the air, now!
For the love of...
Oh yeah, that's right. I was stalling.
You okay, little guy?
Yeah, don't worry about me. Ixia's the one that needs help.
Ixia, Holy!
You're the one who hurt these kids, am I right?
So what if I did?
That boy's my son, you know.
Really?
I can tell by that look on your face, you think I just revealed some weakness you can exploit. You misunderstand me, Borzax. I told you that as a warning. You see, I'm usually a pretty diplomatic guy, but when someone harms my son, well, it tends to impair my better judgment, makes me quite impulsive. Some would say, trigger happy. So take a moment to thank your God he's well enough to stand, because if he wasn't able to, neither would you.
Easy there, kiddo. I gotcha.
Get our backpacks. We found.
All taken care of.
What the? Hey, get off! Oh, I see. Made yourself a friend, did you?
Now, how about we end this ridiculous game?
Oh, planning to kill me for hurting your kid?
The thought crossed my mind, but no. Call your men.
Huh?
I know you have them waiting on standby. You wouldn't come here alone, even to pick on a couple of children. You're smart enough to plan for something like this, so let's cut to the chase. Call your men.
Captain, what? If he did have his men on standby, why would you let him call them here? We should capture these two while we have the chance!
He's planned for that. I'd prefer we skipped a few steps and dropped the pretenses. Borzax, call them.
You're a real killjoy, Poochie. But hey, I ain't gonna argue. It's your death wish. Just remember, you literally asked for this. Line them up by the big center pillar thing.
Perfect.
I hope you know what you're doing, sir.
I do. Just keep your eyes on Borzax. Ignore anything else going on. If you notice it, they'll notice it.
Anything else?
If you haven't yet, good. That'll make it easier for you.
Here, sir.
Finally! Sweet oxygen. Now then, any last words, furballs?
Yes, actually. I'd like a moment of silence. We'd like to briefly reflect on our impending demise. You see, take a moment of peaceful reflection.
Fine. I don't mind taking a minute to bathe in the satisfaction of having you cocky furries dead to rights.
Oh, don't mind me.
What the? Who are you? Wait a sec. You're that thief the UDO's here looking for, Kristeka, right?
Me? Nah, honey. You got me mixed up with someone else. I mean, I can see where you'd get that idea since I am stealing this thing. No, my name's Kaboosh.
What the heck are you babbling about? You got something wrong with your brain, or are you just insulting me?
Oh, no, it's okay. People tend to have a hard time with it. It's an old name. Very ethnic. You pronounce it like this.
Blasted furry floozy! After I'm done with the Cloudscratcher cretins, she's next!
Sir, about that.
Back to the Godspeed unit, things aren't looking well for Solstice. However, despite his injuries, this gives Mercury a second wind, determined not to let his wife die. He throws her a light grenade, but is immediately shot square in the chest. Being choked out, she uses the grenade right there and then, which burns his eyes out and destroys her hand. They start running, to which is revealed that Carmen Thoa's eyes were prosthetics and takes them out. Back with the assassin Blue Monday, to which they've destroyed a wide majority of their battling room. Turns out she was just trying to stall him from getting the data, but as we know, Caxtur was the one getting the data, and so she jumps down into the water in hopes of getting there in time. Unfortunately, an explosive is set her way, her glasses floating to the shoreline. And now we're back to the crew. As they're escaped, the captain explains how exactly he planned all that out. Basically, Nina was in the room planning to head towards that battery the whole time, and once they were cornered, he knew that once Nina was noticed, they'd use their smoke bombs, which would disorient the guards, allowing them to escape. Unfortunately, Borzax isn't so easily swayed, as he quickly catches up to them.
You think you can get away from me? I'ma break every one of you furballs into tiny little pieces!
Oh, great! What do we do now?
What? Couldn't that chick have thrown sleeping gas?
Burt, if it was sleeping gas, we'd be... Oh, never mind!
You're dead, you pieces of...
That was close. Sorry it took so long to find you guys.
Is that Soggat?
Yes, sorry if I made you guys worry about me, but I had to find a way to get us all out safely. Don't wait up for me. I'll meet up with you guys at the plant. Keep going down this tunnel. First exit on your left will take you back to, well, surface area. Turn right on the exit and follow the road all the way. It'll take you back to the ship.
Soggat, you're a lifesaver. Well, more than usual, I mean.
Now to make sure they don't have to worry about any Imperials. Luckily, these controls are incredibly user-friendly. Ah, there it is. The floodgate controls. Now to wait for the crew to make their exit.
You think some rusted old doors are gonna stop me? I'm gonna kill you, you understand? Kill every last... What? Oh, I'm gonna get you for this! You hear me? You're all dead! What are you doing? Let me go! I'm not finished with them yet. I gotta kill him! Kill him! I gotta... Listen to me, you over-promoted simpleton. I am about to begin the final stage of this mission, which means this entire colony and everyone in it is about to be vaporized. So forget about your fixation with these animals. Get your men and get back to the ship.
What happened to your clothes?
No!
That's it. I've had it.
What? Don't you want to see more of the Empire's glorious conquest?
You know, back when I used to read the old popes, I was a big fan of environmental storytelling. Now I hate environmental storytelling. Of course he gives us this job, makes us go in there, not his vipers. No, us. And for what? So we can get traumatized for just these little home batteries that I guarantee the military has no use for.
So what made you call it?
Room with a crib.
Ouch.
Forget this. I'm gonna go take a leak.
Where are you going? There's like 100 bathrooms here.
I'm not going back into any of those houses. I'll just go in the bushes. Yeah, this is totally what I signed up for. I swear I was better off on the streets.
Shouldn't be too much farther now. If we can just manage to avoid any... Imperials.
I didn't see anything. Go on.
Captain, there's no way we can trust this guy. As soon as we leave, he's gonna go tell his commander where we went.
I said I didn't see anything. All right? Just go. Get out of here.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I don't have time to wait for the rest of you. This'll have to do. All right, maggots. That little friend of theirs on the intercom sent them in this direction. If we hurry, we can still catch them.
¿Qué es esto? I thought you said yelling out attacks wasn't your style.
Yeah, well, that cute ninja boy made it look pretty cool, so I thought I'd give it a shot. Funny you should mention the man on the intercom, Borzax. He told us exactly where to find you.
Sorry, but you won't be going anywhere near the Cloudscratcher people. Excremento para ese cerebro.
You. You actually showed your faces. The exile's little dollies. They'll make me a colonel if I bring back your heads.
Come and take them, Cyclops.
Oh!
You really ought to learn some self-control!
Holy crap, we made it!
But where's...
Hey! Here I am! I made it! Never had that much in my life.
Glad you made it. Now we just need Sally Jean.
No need to worry about her. She should be aboard the ship already.
She made it back?
Wait, when? Last we saw her, she was running down some cave deep in the mountain none of us even knew about. How'd she end up back here?
I'm not quite sure what's going on myself, but the woman you talked about that gave this mission, they're here, in the settlement. I saw them helping Sally Jean back to the ship on the security cameras.
They're here?
The cameras around here pick up sound, and I heard them tell Sally Jean they were going to help us escape. So after I found you guys, I told them where they were, and that Borzax was chasing her. I'd assume they probably caught up to them by now.
Magnificent work, Soggat. Looks like it's time for us to get out of here.
Caxtur, still at the computer room, completely smashes the center pillar, causing some kind of self-destruct protocol, causing the ground to rumble and for everyone to try their best to get away from the island onto their ships. The Cloudscratchers start flying out of there, agents from Borzax too, but Nina's still deep in the compound with Reeve. And just like that, the whole thing combusts. Cloudscratchers are still getting away on their ship when we are introduced to yet another character from the Blackfang Assassins, who shoots an air fist at the ship. Before they can do a second hit to destroy the ship, they're stopped by the agents. Not much happens here and he gets away. And the Cloudscratchers are fine, so I'm not really sure why they introduced a brand new character at the last second when you have several other new characters you also introduced that are also assassins that could have given the same result. Whatever. We shoot back into the past right before the settlement blew up. Reeve is shouting at Nina to listen to her and stay close because right before the settlement explodes, she uses a massive shockwave to protect them, which weakens her significantly. They have a brief heart-to-heart because they still do do love each other, and Reeve was willing to save her sister even though she's a wanted criminal. So when the UDO ship approaches to get Reeve, Nina escapes onto her ship with a stolen massive battery and flies off. The Empire has officially gotten what they needed from the avian archives, particularly several containers worth of the toxic toast and the schematics to a tower of some kind. With this, the Emperor is confident they have won the war and will begin production on this mysterious tower immediately. But before we can close out on this chapter, we get one last scene from the Cloudscratcher crew.
Huh? How long was I out? Pitterpat's here? Did Felix talk to the captain into letting us keep him? Wait! Felix! He was hurt! Is he okay? Fine, Delila. You win.
And with that, we reach the conclusion of Cloudscratchers. That isn't to say the series is over, of course, not by a long shot. In fact, the series is still going to this day, and is currently on arc 5 Starstruck. So, if you're interested in seeing more, even if it's not completed yet, go check out the official website at cloudscratcher.com, where the comic is hosted. They seem to update the comic semi-regularly, about every 2 weeks, so you're welcome to continue the adventure there. As I said at the start, this series is very near and dear to my heart. Despite being very cartoony, it's still realistic in a way. It doesn't act like the world revolves around the cast, it doesn't act like they can fix everything all by themselves, but in that same regard, it doesn't act like everything is hopeless. In a world where we're constantly reminded of capitalism and global warming and war and a dozen and one problems the average person can't really solve, I feel like Cloudscratcher gives a pretty good message, in that as hopeless as the world is, darkness is not all there is. That there's still life left to live and hope to be had, that things will get better, even if we aren't inherently strong or rich or worth whatever our employers or parents or community deem we are. It really does suck how underrated this series is, and how it's seemingly gone under everyone's radar over the past 13 consecutive years. With only 15 pages of fan art and not a single fanfic to its name. About that OC I made that I mentioned at the start, I'm 99% certain that this is the first ever Cloudscratcher OC, unless you count this red one seen in the aforementioned fan art pages. So if you liked hearing about this series, go make something! Add something to this tiny fandom and send it to its creator at Baerutt on Twitter. I'm sure he'd appreciate it. On that sappy note, thank you so much for watching this video. This is a full 57 pages long, and although the comic did have its hiccups at the end with pacing and characters, I still feel it's a worthy read with some epic, unhinged, and even wholesome moments, and I'm glad to have shared it with you. Special thanks to all the voice actors that made this possible. They're on screen now, and I couldn't have done this without them. You also find them in their pages in the description. Anyways, this was Spice from Cook Cafe, and I'll see you around. Peace!